The Software Leaders Uncensored podcast, where tech leaders grow beyond the code.
You're listening to Software Leaders Uncensored, the no-fluff podcast for tech execs who are done with buzzwords and BS. I'm Steve Taplin, CEO, serial entrepreneur, and currently writing my second book about what I've learned through building 30 ventures, having 20 fail, and 10 wins. I've taken companies public, franchised them nationwide, and raised tens of millions of dollars. The key thing that tied all my companies together is I always built custom software to differentiate the company and the user experience. Now through my company Sonotify, I help tech leaders scale software engineering teams with elite nearshore engineers who move fast and deliver. Each episode, I sit down with real software leaders talking about what's working, what's broken, and how to build what actually matters. So let's dive in. Today, our guest is Scott Bendle out of Auburn Birds, Michigan. Scott is a longtime CIO with an extensive operations background who works for a large company called Rigaku, and we're honored to have you on the show today, Scott.
Oh, thanks, Steve. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. Scott, give everybody the 1 to 2 minute story on your background and how you landed as CIO of your current company.
Started my career in defense, teaching and then the defense industry. I worked in Michigan and a company that made magnets for the hard drive industry. Ended up working in Indiana for a little while, making rare earth magnets, which is a big topic with the tariffs and such, because that production's all over in China now. I ended up moving to Rigaku when that company shut down. So I've been with Rigaku for 23 years now. I started out in operations, managing engineering, production, purchasing, all aspects of all the groundwork kind of things that supported the organization. And after 9 years, I had an opportunity to start helping out when we were looking at ERP selection. I was on the committee for doing that. It was about a 6-month process, pretty intensive. At the end of it, the CFO asked if I was interested in becoming CIO because I had worked well with the IT team. And I was really looking for a change at that point anyway. So it was a great opportunity to move into the area. I had gotten a master's degree in technology management while I was prior to that. So it was sort of a good fit.
Gotcha.
Got the opportunity to move into the CIO role, and I've been doing that for 14 years now.
Excellent. Tell everyone a brief overview of what Rigaku does.
Do a lot of different things. So it's a technology company primarily based in Japan. We make equipment that traditionally uses X-ray technology for analysis. And that's everything from material analysis, trying to create better concretes and plastics, to inline analysis of, say, the sulfur content fuel in diesel fuel. We also are involved in drug discovery, always kind of precursor type stuff. I always like to say we're life science adjacent. We don't do anything that's clinical. We're always preclinical, so we don't have to worry about those forms of regulation.
Life science adjacent. I like that description.
It's a lot better than being in dealing with HIPAA. So we deal with a lot of different types of industries. We also have some laser-based products. Our major location is in the Woodlands, Texas. We have a total of 6 locations in the U.S. We have a couple, 3 sites in Europe, Israel. Basically, my team takes care of everything outside of Japan. Japan is the headquarters for Rigaku. There's about 1,000 employees over there. My team takes care of about 700 employees scattered around the world. Everything outside of Japan is our bailiwick.
Gotcha. And correct me if I'm wrong, Rigaku is private equity owned?
That's correct. No, that's changed. So we had been a family-owned company up until about 3 years ago. The owner sold to the Carlyle Corporation, so private equity. That has, in my mind, been a good thing for us. They were good in terms, specifically for my team. They were a great voice in the senior staff for us in terms of security. So they were very helpful, gave us a lot of guidance. We've really improved our processes and technology and tools. But we went public a year ago, October, on the Nikkei. So we're now a public company.
So you've been CIO through family owned, through private equity owned, and through a public company. That has to keep you on your toes.
Yes. Yeah, there were some real challenges getting ready for going public.
So you mentioned prior to the show that you're currently managing ERP implementations as well as Intune upgrades. ERP projects are notoriously challenging.
Yes.
Tell me about what you've done to make sure they succeed and minimize disruption?
So, as I said, I was on the selection committee for the ERP system. We used some outside consultants to assist us with that. It was a challenging project. I think we started out with maybe 21 different vendors we were looking at. We did a lot of evaluations, narrowed it down. We did some demos. It was down to 3 vendors, and we ended up picking Sightline from Infor, and that's what we're still using today. At that point in time, we had 6 sites in the US and we had 5 different ERP platforms because we had grown by acquisition. Because of reporting to Japan and just having a better system to work with, the focus was to get all of us on the same system. The things that helped us out with that was going through and doing a lot of process mapping to understand that although the sites did things very differently, not just the products that they made, but the approach to market was very different, we still had a lot of very common processes. So helping us to understand what our common processes were, where we were at with those, and where we wanted to go, gave us a great deal of understanding how we were going to use the ERP system and how the ERP system reflected what we wanted to do. I'd seen an article, 5 or 6 years ago, and I wish I'd seen it at the time of implementation. And the guy had done a huge ERP implementation and had deeply regretted the customization that they had done. We did very little by design immediately, but the refrain that he used was, nobody buys from us because we've got the best AP process in the world, because nobody cares. So don't customize it to death. And fortunately, that was kind of our mantra right from the start with ERP was, these guys do this all the time. They do it in many, many different companies, in many, many different industries. And what they've got is reflective of best practice. So we're going to change our behavior to meet the software rather than making the software change to meet us. And I think it was a good move then, and it's still a good move now.
Interesting. I think very few CIOs would take that approach. They would have the mindset of, no, we have to customize the heck of it to what we're already doing. And you wonder why so many ERP projects fail.
Oh yeah. Well, we took 6 sites live in 18 months because of that philosophy. When you're setting up an ERP system, you're flipping a lot of switches. Basically, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and you're making all kinds of decisions. We did the implementation serially. So we started out in Carlsbad, California. And as we did it, we documented, okay, this is the decision we've made, and this is the next decision we made, and how we were going to do purchasing, how we were going to do engineering, what the processes were. And because we knew we were going to have the same arguments at each site, so we could take that document and move it to the next site and say, look, we've already had this conversation, we've already discussed it. Here's why we're going to do it this way, and this is why you're going to do it this way. So I think that was really, really beneficial in terms of not having to plow the same ground over and over again throughout the implementation.
Gotcha. Talk to me about your engineering team that you have internally. How many engineers do you have today?
No, I classify them as engineers. So I've got 3 people that work on the networking side in terms of managing all the phone connections, all the security, all of our infrastructure in terms of communications and servers and all of that. And then I've got another 3 people that are working on the ERP side of things. A lot of the, if we have to have a form change, most of those we can do in-house. If it's a little more extensive, sometimes we'll reach out to our value-added partner that we utilize for supporting ERP. I just added 3 people on the Salesforce team, so that's new to me. And then I've got a web guy that works about half time for me. And recently added 2 people in Germany, and we have a group in Israel that I work with now.
Have you guys done much custom software development internally outside of your ERP and Salesforce systems?
Well, it's sort of a bifurcated conversation, I guess I'm going to say, because every piece of equipment that we sell has software on it. We sell a computer and we sell an X-ray piece of equipment that does analytics. That software is primarily done in Japan. We have some software engineers that work in the United States, but they are not within my team. So it's not something that I have a lot of direction around.
Gotcha. As a CIO in 2025 and the crazy environment what are some of the biggest challenges you're facing?
Well, my current stressor is we're implementing our ERP system in a location in Germany, and that's been a challenge. The laws are different, the demands are different, the priorities are different too. So, working through that. The most exciting thing is AI. We're rolling out because of our association with Carlisle. we've got access to an instance of ChatGPT. So we've got an agreement in place with OpenAI. We're rolling out licenses for that.
What kind of areas are you utilizing that for?
Well, because we have 150 licenses in 10 locations, essentially. So everybody gets 15 is how we've let it out. And the conversation I've had with the site managers is don't just give it to your scientists. I mean, we have a lot of PhDs in with Rigaku. Don't just give it to scientists, give it to your engineers, give it to somebody in purchasing, give it to people in marketing. And so we're really trying to distribute it broadly. We've had a lot of excitement about it. The marketing is just dove in head first. We've got people using it all kinds of different ways. One of my team members that works on networking, we have a legacy server here at the plant in Auburn Hills. It's so old we're scared to touch it. He said, so he went into ChatGPT and he defined the problem. And I've got to migrate this data, and I risked the server dying on me. Laid it all out, and ChatGPT responded with a checklist of here's how you're going to do this project, and it was damn good. It was exciting to see.
Interesting. I know. So, as a global organization, you're dealing with a lot of security challenges. Yes. You had mentioned shadow IT and vetting new applications is something that takes a great deal of your attention. How are you tackling those?
Yeah. So shadow IT, it's very difficult for us to find. We've got people going on. We've got groups licensing things and we're not aware of it. We recently bought a product called SquareX that sits on the browser, and I really don't want to see what people are doing on the internet. But I do want to see, are we getting applications utilized that we didn't expect to? And so we're just rolling that out now. And that's giving us a pretty good sense of people using applications that we didn't really want them using, or, we're seeing data outflow to places that, applications that we really are concerned about because, let's face it, we live and breathe off our intellectual property. I mean, we're a scientific company. Everything we do, is that on that thin margin of being a little bit smarter than the other guy. So letting that intellectual property leak out is a very big concern for us. So being able to chase that down and plug those holes is an important thing to us.
Gotcha. So with Rigaku, you're bridging both Japanese and U.S. cultures. From your perspective, what's the biggest difference in tech philosophy between the two cultures? And how does that impact what you're doing?
For the longest time, it was kind of, I use the word conflict with Japan because their perception of security was very different from ours. We're on the front lines of fake domain names and people reusing their passwords on sites that they shouldn't have. And before we had two-factor authentication in place or SS, people using their network password on sites that they shouldn't have, and then, getting somebody invaded, or even now with two-factor having to educate people that no, just because you get a duo push doesn't mean you should approve it because that's if you didn't trigger it. So, those types of security issues have always been a big challenge for us. Japan can feel very insular. And so they were shrugging their shoulders, saying, we don't have these security problems. We're not you. We don't have to worry about this stuff. So convincing them that it was stuff that we needed to worry about was a challenge. And I'm speaking out of school a little bit, but Japan has the luxury of a fairly captive market. They can tell the customers, hey, this is how, we're going to do things. Whereas, Americans are a little bit more, this is how I want to do things. So, the cultures are a little bit different between our customer bases. So I'm not always in the middle of that. That's something, as I said, I don't have responsibilities in programming, but occasionally I'll find myself having to kind of be voice of the customer on some things.
Gotcha. How long ago was it that your company went public?
October last year.
Okay, so it's relatively new. And what exchange did you guys go public on?
The Nikkei in
Gotcha.
Japan.
So from a compliance perspective, as the CIO of the company, did you have a bunch of hoops to jump through to prepare yourselves for the compliance requirements of that exchange?
So it's J-SOX instead of SOX. So it's the Japanese version of SOX. I had a lot of questions to answer. I had a lot of supporting evidence to pull together. I was not the one that had to assemble all that. I was just the one that had to answer the 37,000 questions.
Questionnaire after questionnaire after questionnaire, right?
Oh yeah. It became another job. Very glad to have that behind me for now, because that'll all happen again next year. So I didn't have to do all the, collate all the documentation. I just had to respond to the questions. So I had plenty of work. I'm sure they had a lot more.
Gotcha. Scott, what advice would you have for others who are aspiring to be CIOs?
I come from a real non-traditional CIO background because I come from operations. I used to think that was something inhibited me, but I also now I feel like sometimes it kind of is a good leverage for me because I don't always get wrapped up in the technology of how to make something happen. I had worked for a company called MagnaQuench prior to coming to Rigaku, and I had done the quality implementation. We had registered for ISO. The CIO at that location was leaving, and I was driving into work thinking, that if I had an opportunity to do that, I wouldn't mind doing that because it was a good team. And got to work that morning, and my boss called me in and she said, "Hey, we're thinking about replacing the CIO and wondering if you're interested." And I said, "Yep." And she said, "Would you like to think about it?" I said, "No, I thought about it on the way to work." So I did that for about a year and a half, and I felt like it was one of the best jobs I ever had. So exciting, great team to work with, different, unique challenges every day. And I walked in feeling just dumb as a box of rocks half the time. We're trying to get internet connections to a new plant in China, and sitting down with the telecoms, and it is all acronyms with those guys. I mean, it's just an unending flood of acronyms. So I was wearing out pen after pen and taking notes, and then I'd sit down and Google everything afterwards, trying to understand what I had just heard. So not being shy about asking questions, taking lots of notes, and looking stuff up and just trying to build that inventory of information. I think that's the thing, is just dive in head first. That's the most important, and read broadly. All kinds of sources, I think, is another. I'm a big advocate of reading, and that's been very helpful too.
So being a CIO, CTO in today's world is almost an impossible job, in that you have to meet the expectations of non-technical executives and board members or shareholders. You have different business units. You have your own technical and engineering teams. What's the biggest advice you have for tech leaders out there who are juggling all these things? And it is definitely interesting that you come from an operations background. I'm guessing you probably attack things a little different than somebody who maybe just grew up through a technical or engineering background.
For sure. And I'm not saying it's better. It's just different. The soft skills are, I came from a technology background, but, the engineering side of things and the operations side of things. And, I ran a UAW plant for a while. So, I had to learn to stop swearing. So,
I'm guessing that probably wouldn't be good.
No. So, those soft skills, because, you're dealing with, very technically oriented people. And so sitting down and working on communication, making sure that you communicate in a way that isn't talking above or talking down to people that aren't on your team, but helping them, bring them along to understand things is critical. It is really rare that an email will leave my team that 2 or 3 of us haven't read first and gone through and said, because we're process checking each other, because we all know that we suffer from being, for lack of a better term, we're all geeks, and we've got to make sure that we're speaking in a way that other people can understand it. So that is a common practice. Very little leaves our team that hasn't had a couple more sets of eyes on it.
Gotcha. Well, Scott, thank you for getting uncensored with us today. I think it's an inspiration how you rose through the ranks to CIO from the operations side versus a pure technical side, maybe opening up some others of getting the path to tech leadership. Any final shout outs or advice you have for tech leaders out there?
Certainly, you've got the technology challenges, but you're still dealing with people at the end of the day. You're still dealing with processes. And I got into this because, it was really interesting doing the engineering. It was really interesting doing the operations things. But, this is the modern world, right? I mean, all those things that are the glory of manufacturing are all defined by what goes on in the network. In the ERP systems and Salesforce and all the other systems that we use. So, it was an opportunity to really learn how the business works. I think I understand how the business works better than a lot of people in the organization that think they understand how the business works, because you see it all. You're into all of it. So, if you're in operations and you have any inclination towards doing it, certainly educate yourself, but don't shy away from trying to get an opportunity to get into it.
Great advice, Scott. We appreciate it. That's it for this episode of Software Leaders Uncensored. I'm Steve Taplin, CEO, author, and builder of over 30 ventures, all powered by custom software. If this episode sparks something, share it, subscribe, or send it to somebody you know in the trenches. And with that, stay bold and keep building, everyone.